verses that we lifted our hearing, and also last week, those of you that were here, we dived into a series that I believe will probably take us all the way up until Resurrection Sunday, called To Refocus. And our commandment for us is found in 2 Chronicles chapter 7. Just going to live really just one verse. This entire sermonic selection is built around really one verse. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. I want to thank them again for sharing with us today. The preacher knows when the atmosphere is set right, it makes preaching that much easier. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. The Bible says, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. You may be seated. Call to refocus. Last week, we set the foundation and studied our launching pad for the next couple of weeks. My prayer is that we all prepare with a new enlightenment concerning the necessity for each of us to periodically refocus. Now, this call is not just for a season or synchronized with a holiday. It's a process we should often partake in. In fact, truly believe it's a call God, our Father, urges us to rehearse just as much, if not more, than the prayers we recite, pleading for his blessings. It's through refocusing, church, that we express the priority and desire to recommit, reflect, and recenter ourselves within the framework of our relationship with Christ. Call to refocus. Yes. Episode 1 of this series suggested this Lenten season as a call, not the call, but a call. Meaning that Lenten season is not where it stops, it only begins here. Call to refocus. We started our time together by defining, for those who didn't know, what Lent is and is not. Let me rehearse that. Lent is not a diet challenge. Not just some random time during the first quarter of the year when you make tough decisions to give up snacks, coffee, social media, fast food, red meat for a number of days. Lent is not characterized by fish on Fridays. Set aside time when we aim our love at God, praying that he makes the weeks forthcoming a time of pilgrimage and a spiritual growing season. Our prayer, we ask for wisdom to claim it as a period for slowing our pace and for developing a sense of personal peace, beckoning him to help us by grace to overcome temptations that divert us from paying attention to his will, temptations that prevent us from attaining the fullness of faith. Praying that when we are tempted to neglect worship, recall us to a deep enjoyment of word and sacrament. When we are tempted to become self-centered, remind us that it is you who made us and not we ourselves. We are tempted to value convenience over compassion, restore our capacity to care deeply. Grant us during the Lent season ahead a discipline and direction that will strengthen and guide our spirits. Sarah Phillips, you remember, the Crosswalk, helped us pronounce this definition even more. She says Lent is a time that offers us an opportunity to come to terms with the human condition we may spend the rest of the year running from. Brings our need for a Savior to the forefront. Time to open the doors of our hearts a little wider, understand our Lord a little deeper. That when Good Friday and eventually Resurrection Sunday comes, it's not just another day at church, but an opportunity to receive the overflowing graces God has to offer. Church, that's Lent season. Knowing that how much more we should now lend our attention to these next few weeks in a world where the social norm is fast-paced, on the go, full schedules, clouded minds, busyness on top of busyness. Our days are overwhelmed with work, projects, school, events, relationships, problems, responsibilities. It's during this season we will learn and continually practice the art of refocusing. Refocusing on intimate time spent with God that's personal and unrestricted. Refocusing on managing the gift of today, making sure we fulfill our purpose and assignment. Refocusing on the humble reality that we are all sinners saved by love. Refocusing on the goodness of God and the praise and worship that He is due His name. Refocusing on the necessity to grow and reach new levels in relationship with God, because it's that bond that makes it possible to live and not just exist. Church, to refocus. Refocus on what the Lord called you to complete, to change, to shake up, to uncover, to expose, to tear down, to build up. Refocusing on God's kingdom agenda, and as agents of the gospel, remembering it's our duty to showcase this either conceptually or by action. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whomsoever believes in Him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. This is all from last week. Last week we took the scenic route last week and skipped through chapter 6, so that way we weren't dropped in the middle of a congested chapter 7 with no direction. Chapter 6 establishes prayer as a manner of refocusing. Longest chapter in this book, we are given a history lesson of the temple. We get a glimpse of David's ambition. We join in the celebration of God's goodness and promise-keeping nature, and we eavesdrop on Solomon's prayer of dedication. It's his approach to prayer that taught us that when you pray to God, you don't pray as if you're communicating to some distant cosmic genie who only understands a move to a jingle or some nursery rhyme. And if you don't hit the right pitch or say the right words, you won't unlock the secret treasure. No, that's not prayer. Prayer should be spontaneous, free, and specific to your relationship with God and where you are in life. When you pray with the reverence for who the Lord is, and it comes from the depth of your heart, you can talk to Him as if He's right there in front of you. You don't need to quote eloquent words or spiritual poetry to converse with the Creator. Because the reality is you've got too much to dump on God anyway. You don't have the time nor patience for religious rituals and norms. Have I got any help right about that? Sometimes all you have enough sense, energy, and time for is, God, I love you. God, I exalt you. God, I lift you up. God, I need some help. God, I need you to make a way out of no way. God, I'm a mess. God, help me to live better. Is that your testimony here today? You don't have time for deep spiritual introductions that were used in the ancient world. Some of us haven't even mastered English yet. They're all talking about guys and hows and all that, but there's sometimes in your life where all you can get out is, God, save me. God, deliver me. God, I need some help. Church, is through this same prayer, Solomon implied not to start out the conversation with a request, but adoration and worship for who God is. That you pray with confidence in the good shepherd you are speaking to. Certainty in a God who you've never seen but believes He hears the prayers addressed to Him from distant locations. Why? Because remember, faith in God is the envelope, postage stamp, and delivery system in which your mail reaches heaven's mailbox. Prayer absent from faith is like attempting to mail a blank piece of paper to an unknown destination. Won't get very far. Faith is the springboard we launch our prayers off of to reach God's throne. After picking apart Solomon's prayer last week, we then began to examine the Lord's response. It's twofold, both public and personal. In His own way, He confirmed His approval of the temple being the new place of worship. It was a positive response. We emphasize that good news because when we refocus our life on what God decides is significant, we can stand in anticipation for a positive response. Some people, that's exactly what you need to hear this morning again, because you've been catching trouble everywhere you turn. If it's not one thing, it's another. And that could very well be the master telling you, you need to refocus. Focus on the truth that I am God and I never slumber nor sleep. On my love that covers a multitude. On my grace that grants favor you could never deserve. On my mercy that isn't recycled, but it's new every morning. Refocus on my ability to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that you can ask or think. Refocus on the fact that I died and was buried and got up a few days later, conquering the sting of death and victory over the grave. And if I could achieve that, I can handle whatever it is. Last week, we saw that when you refocus, God responds that you are in a position to react like the Israelites. In that text it says, yes, God is good. His love never quits. In other words, church, refocusing clears your mind and settles your racing heart so that you can focus your attention on what God is owed. Because the truth is, when your eyesight is held captive by life, you tend to lose consciousness that despite how difficult and stressful your journey is, God is still worthy to be praised. Yes, He is. And see, last week I didn't really do a good job at driving this point home, but I figured I would make up for it today. Because when you refocus, you could have lost your job and still praise Him like He's already opened the door for something else. When you refocus, you could have had the worst week of the year, but still tell folk how awesome God is because He woke you up and started you on your way. When you refocus, you could have lost a loved one who was saved and knew Jesus, be sad because of the void, but still rejoice in the fact that they're in a better place. Church, when you refocus, you could have been experiencing some of this world's most difficult problems, but still have a smile on your face because it's the Prince of Peace that has sustained you and kept you and brought you this far. I wonder if you are having to find something in your life that can stand your feet and tell God, thank you. See God's goodness despite whatever you're going through. Here it is. Pick up where we left off. Verse 4 says, the then king of all Israel worshiped, offering sacrifice to God. King Solomon worshiped by sacrificing 22,000 cattle, 120,000 sheep at the dedication of the temple. Don't miss that. The priests were all on duty, choir and orchestra of Levites that David had provided for singing and playing anthems to the praise and love of God were all there. Across the courtyard, the priests blew trumpets. All Israelites were on their feet. Solomon set apart the central area of the courtyard in front of God's temple for sacred use, and there sacrificed the whole burnt offerings, grain offerings, and fat from the peace offerings. The bronze altar was too small to handle all these offerings. Watch this. Following their verbal reaction of reverence, admiration, and glorification, their expression of gratitude shifts. It's right there in the text. It takes on a more demonstrative look. Right before our eyes, we see it growing arms, legs, and features that identify a worthy God who kept His word to an undeserving people. The overwhelming celebration of gratefulness breaks out into a banquet. By the swiftness of our writer's pen, he jerks our mind as if we transition scenes in a movie. God's glory has just filled the house, so invasive and so awesome that it prohibited the presence of any unwanted guests. Now, suddenly, we are dropped into this ceremony where people are zealous in their efforts to show their appreciation for the promise keeper's goodness. The Bible says King Solomon worshiped by sacrificing 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep. According to theologian John Vernon McGee, there are many that argue their skepticism of these verses. In their opinion, they say this offering and sacrifice was too extravagant, that it was excessive and unnecessary. They then argue, they say it would have been physically impossible to offer that many sacrifices on that altar. Their third argument is they say there was no necessity for all this slaughter of animals. And friends, I contest this way of thinking because I personally believe this sacrifice was a model of the sacrifice of our Lord and Savior that He gifted us in Calvary. In fact, it's not outrageous at all, because when you really narrow your concentration on the generosity of God, words won't always do justice. Audible gestures are pleasant, but sometimes not good enough. And when you undoubtedly refocus, it should cause you to dedicate and sacrifice your love and your life to a God who has looked beyond your faults and met your every need. Church, I mean, when you really ponder the benevolence of the great I Am, it should cause you to dedicate and sacrifice in such a way that folks will criticize you and tell you it don't take all of that. I wish you would sit down. You're doing too much. But sit down because God has been too good to me. And I want to let your testimony this morning. You can't be still because you look back over your life. The Lord has been too good. No high five, but just give him an elbow and say, he deserves that and something. He deserves that and something. I'm trying to ask you, why you always at church? Because I own. Why you always helping other people? Because I own. Why you always giving more resources? Because I own. Why you always sacrificing your time? Because I own. I dare you just to celebrate God right now. Verse 8, the Bible says, this is how Solomon kept the great autumn feast of booths. 7 days there were people there all the way from the far northeast, the entrance to Hamath, to the far southwest, the brook of Egypt, a huge congregation. They started out celebrating for 7 days and then did it for another 7 days. Week for dedicating the altar and another for the feast itself. 2 solid weeks of celebration. 23rd day of the 7th month, Solomon dismissed his congregation. Bible says they left rejoicing over all the good God had done for David and Solomon and his people Israel. King James Version says they were sent away glad and merry in their hearts. That word merry in the Hebrew literally means good, well-pleasing, fruitful, morally correct, proper. It is recorded that people came as far as Hamath and the Wadi of Egypt. This grand event included a significant council to dedicate the altar on the 8th through the 14th days of the 7th month. That would include the Day of Atonement. It was then followed by the Feast of Tabernacles, which fell on the 15th through the 21st, and a special assembly on the 22nd. Lasted for a considerable amount of time due to the cultural norms. The sojourn to arrive at the celebration may have been tedious for some, but they still made it. Festivities weren't rushed. Even though prolonged, the Bible says that they enjoyed it.
All right now.
Shout to God as I make ready to hit the pause button. Until next time, let me say this first, that when you refocus, don't miss this, it sends a shockwave of excitement to those around you. When people see you getting your affairs in order, dedicating and sacrificing, when people see your prayer life reach new levels and your relationship with God take off into areas that you've never experienced, when people see you spending more time in your word, or they see you applauding God for his marvelous acts when you could have easily been complaining, when people see your character and your integrity resembling more of Christ, it vibrates a loud call to those within your reach to refocus as well, and provokes them into a life much more fruitful. It's right there in the Bible.
All right.
In other words, what are you saying? Pastor, set the tone for your family and friends, for strangers and associates to refocus. Come on, bless the Lord.